We had already talked about difference between spoken and written discourse and discussed discourse modes according to their aim. And these, as you remember, are narration, description, exposition, and argument. Today we will talk about narration type, in particular in spoken form. As it is known, spoken discourse is always more difficult, and not only for those who study the language, even for native speakers, there are some areas of the language where it is challenging for them to express their thoughts. It depends on many factors, to what specialty and age group this or that person belongs, but most importantly, what type of spoken discourse they are dealing with. And interestingly, narrative discourse is a rather big challenge sometimes, just because not all the people are good at telling stories, no matter if it is native speaker of English or English learner. There are many reasons for it, but basic ones are: the first, you have to make it interesting. No one will listen to you if you talk and do not drive people's attention. And second, therefore, in order to make the story interesting, you need to know how to use vocabulary, style, intonation, right pace, and structure of your story. And I bet you have already experienced the occasion when you started telling about some event in your life, got confused or stressed or excited, and ended up with no story. And you are not alone, believe me. That's why it is so important to know the elements of narrative discourse, or in simple terms, storytelling discourse. And these are abstract, orientation, complicating event, resolution, and coda. Abstract is like an introduction to, that you make when you want to tell someone a story. Something like, hey, I want to tell you something. Then here comes orientation. That's how we call information about time and place of the thing we want to talk about. For example, when I had a walk in the park yesterday, this is exactly orientation. It gives you both place and time of the event you are going to describe. And after that comes the complicating event. Out of its name you have probably guessed already, it's something most important. And it is. It's a piece of information about the main event, main focus of your story. For example, I met my old friend Greg. Usually complicating event is the most interesting, exciting moment that the speaker wants to tell. It is, if you will, a climax of the whole story. Resolution is the next element of the story. It is something with which the story ends with. When you tell someone how you met your friend Greg and how happy you were and how you were talking, you cannot just end the story here, because the listener will without a doubt ask you, and then what? And then we have said goodbye and promised to keep in touch, that's it. This answer concludes how all ended. This is called resolution. As for coda, coda is an element of a story that you may include or may not. It is a bridge between the story itself and what is happening at the moment of your conversation. This element connects them. For example, your speaker may ask you, do you still keep in touch with an old friend? And your answer can be, I haven't seen Greg since then up to this day. Up to this day, this phrase indicates the present moment when you sit and tell all that stuff to your speaker. And here is one more thing, which is called evaluation. Evaluation are words and stylistic effects that make a story interesting, more exciting, colorful, and drive listeners' attention to certain details. For example, listen, yesterday I was watching the football match at home. It was so exciting. You won't believe how unpredictable it was. My team scored a goal at the very first minute. Take a look at the line number 3. It is between actually orientation and complicating event, to say simply. This sentence describes a complicating event in a colorful and interesting way so that your listener desperately wants to hear the news like, what? This sentence is an example of how evaluation works. And it can actually appear everywhere and decorate all these 5 parts of your storytelling discourse. Of course, real storytelling, not talking about real conversation, doesn't always include all these 5 elements. Sometimes some elements are not included at all. For example, abstract and orientation is not always necessary, especially when the speaker and listener know what they are talking about before the moment of their talking. For example, when your friend knows that you are going to take an exam in Tashkent on April 20, he may call you on 25th and ask how it all went. And for you, it is not necessary to tell the place and time of the story just because you and your friend both know what you are talking about. Like, so how did it all go? Very good, I'm more than happy. It is important to remember that, in reality, a lot of situations happen when you tell the story together with other speakers. For example, now you are all students. But when you graduate, many years pass, you meet together, you will of course recall your exams. And you will use storytelling discourse for that purpose. But it will be different. It will not be that perfect anymore. You will interfere each other, contribute to each other's memories, and the whole conversation will be a total chaos. But still you will be able to understand it because you all know these events exactly. They happen to all of you at the same moment. That's why it is not necessary to follow all these 5 elements we have just discussed. They are important when someone doesn't hear the story for the first time. At the same time, listeners also should be attentive to speakers. When they ask too many questions or vice versa, the speaker may lose his motivation in telling the story at all. Questions should evaluate the information that was heard and ask gently for continuation or maybe even not, something like, I failed my IELTS exam. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. You cannot just say, and what now? Because it would be very insensitive. Instead, you just wait for the further info, if it will be anyway.